review that I never thought that I would be doing anytime soon.
If you remember my review on Sirius the Jaeger, I normally avoid talking about anything that's immediately come out in recent weeks unless it's gained some major attention. Though that's not to say that any of the shows that have come out this season haven't looked like they're worth my time. I just like to wait a few months or so after they've been released to take a better look at them in their entirety.
But then I got a glimpse of this show. And after losing my mind like the nostalgia critic watching a Canadian or British PSA, nah, not like that. It needs to be a little bit, there it is. I immediately said to myself, I have to review this. And so, here we are. But before I get started with the review, I'm actually going to do something that I've never done on Hanime on Anime before, whether that be on the blog or with the videos. If you have not seen this show, honestly, stop watching the video right now and go watch the first episode. Why? Because I'm going to be spoiling one of the biggest details from the show that pretty much sets the entire tone for it. And in my honest opinion, this show is best experienced when you go into it not knowing anything. But if you're like me and don't care about spoilers, I mean, that one glimpse of the show that I got was this spoiler, then sit back and try to relax. Note the word try. Let's get started on today's review on one of the most talked about shows of 2019, The Promised Neverland.
Though we're not given a very clear idea of where exactly this series is set, it is primarily set in Gracefield, an orphanage of 38 children all under the age of 12. And among them are our protagonists, Emma, a spunky but caring redhead 11-year-old girl, Norman, a quiet but intelligent white-haired boy, also age 11, and Ray, a black-haired boy, once again age 11, who is often very cynical but well-meaning. And while we get some very eerie foreshadowing throughout the first episode, such as a gate that bars the orphanage from the outside world, the children who get adopted from the orphanage not writing back, and all the orphans mysteriously having numbers tattooed on their necks, all of them live happy lives under the watchful care of their caretaker, Isabella, often referred to by the children as Mom. The first episode opens cheerfully enough with one of the orphans, a 6-year-old girl named Connie, being adopted. But on the night of her adoption, she ends up leaving her beloved stuffed animal behind. That's when Emma and Norman take it upon themselves to rush to the gate and return it to her. But when they reach the gate, they make a disturbing discovery that turns their whole world upside down.
Adoption day is a lie!
Oh yeah, you better believe we get into some dark, disturbing, baby-killing territory here. Which is why I'm giving you the opportunity to pause the video right now and go find you a durable pair of brown pants, because I guarantee you things only get worse from here. But if not, and you are still here, you have been warned. Prepare to dump some bricks.
Not only do Emma and Norman learn that the children who get adopted are in actuality being killed, but they're being sold off as delicacies to giant man-eating monsters, bringing home the shocking truth that Gracefield is in fact a farm for raising children as food for these walking nightmares. What makes this fact even sadder and more disturbing, Isabella is not only fully aware of what's going on, but is in full cooperation with the monsters.
Well, chances are you won't be sleeping for a week. Especially not after seeing these things. Now I won't be sleeping for a week.
After learning this terrifying truth, Emma, Norman, and Ray, who becomes involved later on in the series, make a plan to escape Gracefield with all of the other orphans in tow. Based on this synopsis alone, it's not hard to see why this show has gotten so much attention, And as you'll find out in a minute, it does more than just keep you up at night.
Like I said in the beginning, I had no intention of reviewing this show whatsoever. Watching it, maybe. But honestly, this has been one of the best shows of 2019 so far. Now, I know that you're thinking I'm probably jumping on the hype train, but I'm sorry. This show deserves the hype that it's getting, and for all the right reasons.
While the show is still ongoing, I give The Promised Neverland a 92.
Oh boy, howdy, where do I start with this? You know, I think I'll start off talking about what everybody seems to talk about after they watch this. The plot twist ending in episode 1.
This was the freakiest plot twist I have ever seen. And that's not just in anime, but in TV and film, period. It's insane how the episode starts off so cheerful and ends super dark. Granted, the foreshadowing that's done in this episode makes everything seem a little off, but it doesn't click until you see this moment and realize what's really going on. In fact, it's because of this twist that this episode is by far one of the best pilots I've ever seen in anime, rivaling that of Attack on Titan. Heck, by episode 2, it becomes even more like Attack on Titan when you realize that there's a giant concrete wall surrounding Gracefield. Don't worry, the humans are paying for it. Anyways, this twist is not just shocking and terrifying, it's haunting. The show plays off this notion of finding out that the people who are supposed to care for you actually have little care for you at all, or even don't have any concern for you. It's this sense that your loved ones don't have the best intentions that makes this scene and the entire concept of the show terrifying. And the mere thought of it lingers because it is literally the worst situation a child could find themselves in. I remember after watching the first episode in its entirety that the thought of these poor kids being seen as little more than food while they're being lied to about it their entire lives was something that stuck with me for days.
And to make it more terrifying, you never see this coming.
Yeah, in all the advertising I saw for this show, not one word was ever said about this scene. You literally don't find out about it unless you watch the first episode, or read the manga, or spoiled it on Wikipedia. One of my favorite things to do shortly after the series came out and after I saw this episode was to watch other people react to that ending. People can't believe what they're seeing. And in all of the reactions that I have seen, everyone is left speechless. Why? Because all of a sudden, Gracefield becomes a prison, Adoption Day becomes the scariest thing ever, and Mom becomes one of the evilest human beings alive.
Dear Lord, bless these children that I'm about to hand over to giant monsters in service to the Demon Lord. Amen.
The ending also leaves this interesting dynamic where you have to be a complete sociopath or a complete psychopath in order to raise these kids, knowing that they're little more than livestock to...
Stop that.
And it's from this twist that literally comes out of nowhere that sets the tone for the series. Because of this ending, you're not only left shocked and horrified, but you're left with this sense of despair and desperation that just grabs you and gets you hooked.
And while a plot twist doesn't make a good show, this show, fortunately, knows how to keep you invested once you're hooked.
One of the many elements to the show that I absolutely love is that there's this bit of a pattern that gives you an idea of what to expect without being too monotonous. I know I've talked about the plot twist in the first episode, but what makes it nice is that each episode ends with a plot twist. Now, I know that most shonen shows have something like this at the end of each episode, But I think what makes this show stand out is that each episode always introduces some new element that grabs your attention at the end. It's literally surprise after surprise after surprise after surprise. Whether it's a new caretaker moving in, or learning that there's a spy, or if it's just your average cliffhanger. Each episode ends on a high note that makes you go, "What?" It's these little plot twists that keep you interested in what's going on, and it's nice that you can expect them in each episode. Some people might find this a little deterring, but I like that it's consistent. This may be because I'm an aspie and like to know what's expected, but at least it's done without giving too much away.
What I also like too is that it cleverly shows you what's going on.
Now I know it sounds redundant that a show shows you what's taking place, but The Promised Neverland cleverly does this by showing you exactly what you need to know. All it takes is a look or a glimpse at something that could be a clue, and we understand exactly what's going on. I've mentioned before how the first episode gives us glimpses of the numbers tattooed on the kids and the gate, but they also focus very well on the facial expressions as well. And then there are those moments where you get taken down the halls of Grace Field, wondering where you'll go next or what you'll see next. All of this creates this perfect atmosphere that constantly leaves you on edge and guessing. Like I said, there's a predictability to each episode, but the show definitely has ways of getting you through each one.
On top of those elements, this show, in my opinion, is perfectly paced.
I feel like a big problem with shonen shows nowadays is that they like to take their sweet time in expanding on their story arcs for a little too long. The Promised Neverland is different in some regards because it reveals information at the right time and discusses it in the right amount of time. It doesn't reveal one detail and then dwell on it for several episodes. It brings it up, goes over it for a couple of minutes, and moves on, while still keeping a flowing narrative akin to your average shonen series. This series, for the most part, knows when to reveal major chunks of information when it's necessary or when it seems fitting. Much of this consists in major plot twists, but they do grab your attention and they give you the information that you need to know. There have been some times where it fumbles a little, but we'll talk about that later. This certainly makes the show smarter than some popular shonen series to have come out in the past few years. Not saying that they were bad, as it leaves you excited waiting for the next episode.
And for as much as I've been going on and on about the plot and the structure, I can't leave out the characters who are all equal players in this.
The Promised Neverland is very much a plot-driven show, but the characters are pretty interesting assets. For one, our protagonists are all children, which, for a shonen series like this, is very rare. Not only that, our main protagonist is a girl, something that's also pretty rare. I know, more often than not, Emma, Norman, and Ray are the combined main leads, but I went into this show with the understanding that Emma, in particular, was the star, and I feel like the show treats her like that. But what makes these characters, the protagonists anyway, all the more intriguing is that they're thrown into this very dire situation and are all of a sudden forced to think like adults, in spite of the fact that they're not adults. After that first episode, you know that these kids are put in a situation that a child would be too terrified to comprehend, let alone rationally think it through. A child would normally come up with a plan to escape, but chances are they wouldn't think of how to survive once they escape. The show presents these unique sets of challenges that they somehow take in stride, even taking into consideration that they will have to survive once they escape. Sure, someone would call horse crap on that and say that it's the show placing importance on them, but keep in mind, we know from the very beginning that these three kids are not just ordinary kids. And I don't say that because the show likes to repeat it over and over again. Seriously, we get it, people. Taking their intelligence out of the picture, it's still endearing to watch them find a way to escape this situation.
And if the protagonists are just as fascinating to watch, then so too are the antagonists.
Besides the obvious villains of the show, Isabella and Sister Crone are pretty complex villains. I've said it already, but after the plot twist, Isabella goes from being this loving caretaker to a soulless woman with no regrets whatsoever with what she's doing. She's very manipulative, and you find out later that she will go to any means necessary to make sure that everything is under control. A lot of the tension in the show stems from her not knowing what's going on behind the scenes. Anytime she gets suspicious, the tension skyrockets because you know if she knows what's going on, everything goes to crap. It makes her a terrifying villain in the series.
And if she's not terrifying enough, then there's by far my favorite character out of this entire series, and may very well be one of my new favorite anime villains ever, Sister Crone.
Introduced at the end of episode 2 as an extra set of hands for taking care of the kids, Sister Crone is already an enemy. But for me, what makes her far more interesting in the show than Isabella is just how dynamic she is. She is simultaneously terrifying and hilarious at the same time. To the children at Gracefield, she's seemingly pleasant and loving, but it's behind closed doors that we see how unhinged she really is. It's this dynamic that, like I said, makes her a presence within the show that's very unique, and that she can be both terrifying and hilarious at the exact same time. One of the best examples of this is in episode 3 when she's playing tag with the kids. While most of the kids know that it's merely a game, we know that her participation in the game suddenly turns it into a drill, and she holds nothing back, going all out in looking for these kids. But the way she does it is almost comical because she takes it so seriously. She's almost anime's answer to Pennywise. Tim Curry's version, that is.
And now getting off this horse of praises here, if you could call it that, while I'll admit that I've pretty much fallen in absolute love with this series, there are some blemishes to it.
Going back to what I said earlier about how the show knows when to reveal certain details, the show has, on 2 certain occasions, not done so well. One of these happens in episode 3, where we get the scene of the demons who eat the kids holding some kind of council meeting, as well as a bit of name dropping in this and a scene that precedes it. We hear things like him and the Tafari and gosh, I'm not sure what else, but it really didn't seem like it fit. I felt like this scene hurts the appearance of the monsters by taking away the scary part of them. Their appearance in the first episode clearly establishes this fear that we're supposed to have with them. And that's because we don't know that much about them, except that they eat little kids. This scene reveals way too much about them and therefore takes the fear away somewhat. Even when they make a second unsettling return in a later episode, by then it's already too late because we saw what they do when they're not buying dead kids to eat. The other scene that I had a big problem with was in the second episode where Norman makes this half-hearted confession to Ray that he likes Emma. Now, at the time of me doing this review, it doesn't seem to go anywhere, and that's kind of why I didn't like it. It almost felt like it was forced. Like the creator said, hey, let's throw this in there because we can. And it clearly shows that it's just there. Now, like I said, by the time you're watching this, that may have very well come into play somehow. But as it stands for now, it's almost unnecessary. But all things considered, these are just nitpicky problems that you can honestly forgive. Because most of what I said has been very, very positive and can outweigh these problems by a long shot.
In all honesty, I have almost no words to describe the excitement that I felt for this show. But to give you some context here, the last time I watched a newly released anime from beginning to end with the exact same dedication and zeal as the Promised Neverland was the first season of Tokyo Ghoul. That was 5 years ago, people. Think about it. And while it's probably a little too soon to say that this is anime of the year, kind of like what I thought we did with another show, honestly, I would be very, very disappointed if by January 2020 people forgot about this. If you haven't seen it already, go watch it now. I guarantee you that this will be the best thing that you see for the 2019 winter season. And so that wraps up today's review. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and be on the lookout for my autism awareness announcement video coming April 2nd, 2019. And on top of that, I'll also be talking about what I'll be doing for my Autism Awareness Month on that day. So be sure to stay tuned for those. And till next time, run or they will eat you!